The council
We
chamber
must
was
hold
filled
those
with hundreds of
responsible
alien
accountable
delegates.
for their actions
Their voices
and
carried through the
ensure
air in
justice
waves of
prevails.
arrogance and curiosity.
We are
They
here
believed
today to
humanity was
address
a
the
primitive
serious
race,
allegations
a
of
small
war crimes.
species with little influence
evidence
outside
is
their
clear.
fragile homeworld. Many laughed when Earth was granted a small seat at the Galactic Council. To them, humans were amusing, weak, and harmless. The young Marine stood at the center podium, wearing a decorated uniform, medals shining under the bright lights. She looked smaller compared to the towering alien leaders, but her eyes held something they could not understand. The hall quieted as she adjusted the microphone. Her voice was calm but carried a weight that silenced the sneers around her. The war had begun as an accident. A minor skirmish on the edges of space between human patrols and an alien fleet had escalated into something larger. Most galactic races dismissed it as another border dispute. But the aliens were unprepared for the response that followed. They had expected humans to surrender quickly. Instead, the humans fought with a determination that unsettled even the most experienced commanders. The Marine spoke, not of numbers or tactics, but of principles. She began with the story of a ruined city on Earth long before humanity reached the stars. Her voice described how civilians had been caught in fire, how prisoners were treated, and how soldiers had been judged by their actions. The aliens leaned forward, confused. They had never heard of rules in war. To them, victory justified every cruelty. She paused, scanning the room of scaled faces, glowing eyes, and armored forms. Then she explained what humans called war crimes. She told them how humanity had created laws to restrain themselves, to punish their own soldiers if they went too far. Her words carried no pride, only gravity. An alien noble interrupted with laughter, mocking the idea. He asked why any warrior would chain themselves with such rules. The Marine did not shout back. She simply told him what happened to those who broke them. Her tone was steady as she explained trials, convictions, and sentences carried out even against victorious generals. She told them that humans feared their own conscience more than any enemy fleet. The room grew tense. The aliens had seen brutality in every war they fought, yet they had never punished their own for it. To them, cruelty was strength. They could not imagine a species that turned its judgment inward. The Marine then spoke of consequences. She described how, when aliens attacked human colonies, the humans did not simply respond with blind rage. They documented every atrocity, recorded every act against civilians, and prepared tribunals before the battles were even finished. Her voice grew sharper as she explained that when humans fought, they carried not only weapons, but judgment. Many in the chamber shifted uncomfortably. Some scoffed, but others felt unease crawl into their minds. If what she said was true, then humans were not simply warriors. They were something different, something dangerous. A race that could hold itself accountable would not hesitate to hold others to the same standard. Behind her, holographic screens lit up with records of past human trials. Footage of generals in chains, soldiers standing before judges, commanders stripped of their ranks. The aliens murmured, struggling to understand. To them, punishment was for the weak. Yet here stood a species that punished the strong and called it justice. The Marine's voice lowered, carrying a tone that felt heavier than any weapon. She explained that this was why humanity fought differently. They did not fight for conquest or for resources alone. They fought for survival, for principles, and for accountability. She said that when humans spoke of war crimes, they spoke not just of enemies, but of themselves. A silence filled the chamber. Even the arrogant noble who mocked her earlier leaned back, unsettled. The idea that humans carried invisible chains of law and still fought with such ferocity disturbed them. If they were so dangerous while bound, what would they be like unbound? The Marine ended her words with a simple truth. Humanity did not see war as glory, they saw it as a burden. And those who bore that burden would be judged, no matter their victories. She let the words hang in the air, watching as the aliens tried to process the weight of it. For the first time, the council began to understand why the humans were not harmless. They were a species that feared themselves more than any other, and that made them terrifying in ways no weapon could match. The chamber had grown, heavy with silence after the Marine's words. Even those who considered humans little more than primitive animals shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some delegates whispered among themselves, their voices hushed as though afraid the human might hear. Others stared openly, studying the small figure at the podium as though she were more dangerous than a fleet of warships. She stood firm, hands resting lightly on the edge of the stand. Her calmness unsettled them. She was not boasting, not threatening, not trying to prove superiority. Instead, her words carried the kind of quiet certainty that could not be faked. An alien commander with scaled skin and golden eyes finally broke the silence. His voice rumbled across the hall as he demanded to know why humanity would bother with such rules. In his empire, war was a tool of conquest, a method to strip others of resources and pride. To chain warriors with laws was madness. What strength could possibly come from restraint? The Marine did not flinch at his tone. She told him strength without restraint was destruction. She said humans had learned long ago that unbound violence consumed everything, even those who wielded it. Her eyes locked on the commander's, and though she was smaller, he found himself glancing away. She explained that humans measured themselves not by how much power they could unleash, but by how much they could control. She said the true test of humanity's strength was not their weapons or armies, but their ability to stop themselves when rage burned hottest. The words rippled through the audience. Many aliens had fought wars across centuries without such an idea ever crossing their minds. To them, victory justified everything. Yet here was a species that measured itself by limits, not excess. Another delegate, tall and insect-like with shimmering carapace, rose from her seat. She spoke coldly, accusing the human of weakness. Rules, she claimed, meant hesitation, and hesitation, in war, meant death. She declared her people would never sacrifice victory for something as fragile as morality. The Marine let her finish, then lifted her chin. Her voice carried steady authority as she told the delegate that hesitation was not weakness. She said hesitation was humanity's shield, the line between barbarism and civilization. She said the humans had bled for centuries to carve that line, and they would never give it up. Behind her, the holographic screens shifted again, showing images of ruined cities, civilians displaced by war, soldiers tried in court for cruelty. Even after their armies had triumphed, the aliens stared, confused. To them, punishment after victory made no sense. But the Marine pointed at the images and declared this was why humanity survived. Because they remembered. Because they held themselves accountable. Because they never forgot what unrestrained violence did to their own world. The chamber felt smaller now, the air heavy. A few alien leaders who had mocked humans at the start now sat rigid, no laughter on their lips. They saw something in the humans' eyes, a memory of battles fought, not just against enemies but against the darkest parts of themselves. The Marine took a slow breath and told them the most dangerous truth of all. She said that when humans went to war, they carried judgment like a weapon. They recorded every act, every decision, every cruelty, not only for their enemies, but for themselves. And when the war ended, there was always a reckoning. The aliens shifted again. For them, war ended when one side was broken. For humans, war ended when truth was revealed. That thought unsettled them more than fleets of ships or arsenals of weapons. One delegate muttered softly to another, wondering what it meant for their empires if humanity began holding them accountable too. The Marine heard but did not respond. She knew the idea had already taken root. She straightened her uniform and let her final words of the day echo across the hall. Humanity did not claim to be righteous. Humanity claimed only to judge, even itself. And that judgment was what gave their wars meaning, what turned chaos into memory, and what made their victories matter. The room stayed silent long after she left the podium. No one laughed anymore. No one mocked. The aliens sat with a new thought, pressing against their minds that the humans, once considered harmless, carried something far more dangerous than weapons. They carried the weight of conscience. The alien council chamber did not return to normal after the Marine's departure. The silence that lingered in her absence was heavier than before, filled with unease that none dared to name. Delegates who had once mocked humanity's weakness now sat in deep thought, their claws, tendrils, or metallic fingers twitching with nervous energy. In the corner, a tall figure cloaked in pale fabric leaned forward. His people were known as the Jiaruan, conquerors of dozens of worlds, a species that believed cruelty was the foundation of strength. He tapped one long finger against the table and broke the silence with a sharp question. "What happens?" he asked, his voice carrying through the hall. "When humans decide our wars are crimes?" The words spread like a shockwave. Delegates turned to face one another, whispers rising quickly. Many of them had fought wars that included the slaughter of civilians, the burning of cities, and the complete erasure of cultures. For them, this was survival, dominance, the way of the galaxy. But if the humans' strange system of judgment could extend beyond their own soldiers, what would that mean for the rest of them? A reptilian ambassador hissed, his voice sharp with fear. "They are too small to challenge us. Their fleets are limited. Their colonies are fragile. They cannot judge us." But even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed doubt. Everyone in the room had seen how fiercely the humans fought in the border conflict. With fewer ships and smaller armies, they had stood against a much larger force. They fought with strategy, with willpower, and with something the aliens could not quite name. A smaller delegate, insectoid in form, raised her trembling voice. "If they can chain themselves with these laws and still fight so fiercely, then what will they do when they unleash those laws upon us?" The hall erupted into noise, overlapping voices in dozens of alien tongues. Some argued that humans were too few, too weak to matter. Others whispered that perhaps weakness was a mask, a clever disguise hiding something far greater. At that moment, the Marine returned not to the podium, but quietly, standing at the side of the chamber. Her presence silenced them again, as if her footsteps alone carried weight. She had been listening. She let their words hang before speaking, her tone calm but firm. "You wonder what happens if we judge you," she said, her eyes sweeping across the gathered delegates. "The answer is simple. We record. We remember. And when the time comes, we do not forget." The aliens bristled, some in anger, others in fear. But none spoke against her. She explained that humanity's greatest weapon was not its fleets, not its soldiers, not its technology. It was memory. She told them of Earth's history, of generations carrying the scars of old wars so that mistakes would not be repeated. She told them how names of war criminals were spoken centuries after their deaths, not as a warning to enemies, but as a reminder to their own children. The Jiaruan conqueror hissed again, asking why memory mattered when power could erase it. His people erased entire species, leaving no trace behind. To him, forgetting was victory. The Marine's eyes hardened. She said forgetting was the true defeat. She said erasure only ensured the crimes would be repeated, because nothing remained to remind the victors of their shame. She said humanity carved its history into stone, into records, into law, so that every future generation carried the burden of the past. Her voice grew colder as she told them that humans did not fear death or defeat as much as they feared becoming monsters without realizing it. That was why they remembered, why they punished even their own heroes when they crossed the line. The room darkened as the holographic screens lit up again, this time showing images of alien atrocities committed in recent wars. The council gasped. Somehow, the humans had already recorded them. Civilians fleeing burning colonies, prisoners starved in camps, leaders boasting over destruction. The footage played in silence, a mirror held up for the entire galaxy to see. Marine did not accuse. She simply asked, "If we can judge ourselves, what excuse do you have for not judging yours?" No one answered. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any threat, because in their hearts, many of the aliens knew they had no answer. For the first time, the Council began to see humans not as harmless, not as weak, but as something else entirely. A species that carried judgment like a blade. A species that turned memory into a weapon sharper than steel. And beneath that realization, a new fear took root. Perhaps the humans had not come to join the galaxy's games of conquest and power. Perhaps they had come to change the rules entirely. The council chamber emptied slowly after the session, but the unease did not leave with the delegates. It clung to the air like smoke, following them back to their ships, their embassies, and their private quarters. The words of the human marine echoed in their minds, unsettling truths they could not shake. In one hidden corner of the station, several alien leaders gathered in secret. Their forms were different, scaled, feathered, armored, or covered in pale skin, but their worries were the same. They had ruled through fear, through cruelty, through the silence of those they had crushed. But now a new danger had risen, one not made of fleets or weapons, but of judgment. The Jeruan conjurer spoke first, his voice a low hiss. "If humans spread this disease of conscience, our empires will weaken, our soldiers will hesitate, our people will question. We must act before their words infect the galaxy." A feathered ambassador agreed. She had watched the faces of younger delegates in the chamber. They had not laughed at the human speech. Instead, they had looked shaken, even ashamed. She feared that if humanity's voice grew louder, her own people might begin demanding the same chains of law. The insectoid delegate tapped her claws on the table. "Their fleets are small, their colonies young. Strike now, before their memory spreads. Crush them before their laws turn into weapons sharper than blades." The others nodded, but one reptilian leader hesitated. His eyes flickered with doubt. As he remembered the fire in the marine's voice, the quiet conviction that had silenced the entire hall, he whispered that perhaps the human strength was not in numbers, but in something else. Something dangerous. The Jeruan snapped at him, calling him weak, but even as they argued, unease gnawed at their thoughts. They knew the humans were different. They had fought small wars before, but always against enemies who glorified conquest. Never had they faced a species that carried judgment into battle. Meanwhile, the human marine walked alone through the long corridors of the station. Her uniform still carried the weight of her medals, but her shoulders felt heavier than before. She had not spoken to boast. She had spoken because she knew the galaxy needed to hear the truth. Yet she also knew her words would not be forgotten. And not all who remembered them would do so with respect. She entered a secure chamber where a few other humans waited, diplomats, officers, and analysts. Their faces were tired, their eyes wary. One of them asked what the aliens had said, and she replied with a quiet sigh. "They are afraid. That means they will strike." The others exchanged grim looks. Humanity had expected mockery, even dismissal. But fear was something else. Fear made enemies desperate. Fear made them dangerous. The marine leaned against the wall and spoke softly. She told them that the aliens would try to crush humanity before their ideas spread. She reminded them that this was always the way of tyrants. When faced with truth, they chose silence through violence. The others nodded, knowing she was right. Outside, in the depths of space, alien fleets began to move. Quiet orders were given, soldiers were called, and warships prepared. It would not be announced, not yet. It would begin with raids, with sudden attacks on human outposts, with accidents at the edges of trade routes. They hoped to bleed humanity slowly, to weaken them before a full strike. But what the aliens did not understand was that humanity was already preparing. The Marine had not come only to speak. Her words had been both warning and weapon, carrying not just fear but resolve. Across Earth's colonies, soldiers drilled harder, fleets adjusted strategies, and records of alien atrocities were gathered. Humanity would not fight blindly. They would fight with memory. On one distant colony, a group of young human cadets watched the broadcast of the Marine's speech. Their faces were pale, but their eyes burned with pride. They had heard her say that humans carried judgment like a weapon, and they believed it. They swore to live up to it. Back on the station, the Marine sat alone, gazing at the stars beyond the glass walls. She knew the aliens would come for them. She could already feel the storm building. But she also knew something the Council did not yet understand. Humanity did not fear storms. They had weathered them for thousands of years. And every time they had risen stronger, the galaxy thought humans were harmless. Soon, they would learn that judgment could burn brighter than any weapon, and memory could wound deeper than any blade. The first attack came without warning. A quiet slip into the depths of space, as alien ships, disguised as neutral traders, cut through the void toward a human outpost at the farthest edge of Earth's colonies. There was no declaration of war, no formal act of aggression, just swift destruction. The target was a small, peaceful station built for research and trade. There were no military forces stationed there, only civilians and a few support officers. The alien fleet descended on them without mercy. The attack was brutal. Energy blasts tore through the station's shields, and the workers below scrambled for shelter. Alien soldiers stormed the corridors, their weapons leaving nothing but chaos in their wake. But the humans had already known this was coming. It wasn't the first time they had faced such treachery. When the first wave of explosions hit, humanity didn't panic. They didn't flee. Instead, the outposts sprung into action. Defense systems activated, emergency protocols were followed. Even in the face of devastation, the humans stood together, organized, and determined. The alien fleet had underestimated one thing: the depth of the human response. They thought they could strike a blow to humanity's colonies and leave, believing they had caught them unprepared. But humanity had already prepared for this. The Marine's words had set something into motion across the galaxy. The outpost commander, a battle-hardened human officer, immediately sent out a distress signal. But that wasn't all he did. He ordered every officer and civilian to act as one. The security team, trained by the best of Earth's military, retaliated with precision. They didn't just shoot back. They calculated, adapted, and turned the very station's systems into weapons. The aliens' initial advantage in firepower was quickly neutralized as the humans took full advantage of their environment. The battle waged on for hours, and it wasn't until the alien fleet's flagship arrived that the real devastation began. A massive, towering warship, cloaked in black and armed to the teeth, hovered above the station. Alien soldiers began to land, flooding the station's corridors. They expected an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves met by human soldiers who were not only prepared for battle, but fought with a fury that surprised them. One by one, the alien soldiers fell. They were skilled, yes, but they were not prepared for the sheer relentlessness of the humans. The battle wasn't just physical, it was strategic. Human soldiers worked with their systems, adapting quickly, fighting smart. They moved like a coordinated unit, responding to threats faster than the aliens could react. It was clear this was not the first time humanity had fought for survival. When the dust finally settled, the human defenders stood victorious. The alien fleet, once so confident in its power, was now crippled. The flagship was forced to retreat, and the remaining ships quickly followed. The humans had not only defended their station, they had inflicted damage on the invading fleet. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. This wasn't the first time humans had survived against the odds, but this was different. The alien forces had attacked without provocation, and yet humanity had fought back with a combination of strategy, skill, and an unbreakable will to survive. The Marines' words echoed through the minds of everyone who had witnessed the battle. We carry judgment like a weapon. And now, humanity had shown the galaxy just how lethal that weapon could be. Across the galaxy, the Alien Council was in chaos. The attack had failed, but the damage to their reputation was far worse. Delegates scrambled to understand how their forces had been repelled. Many who had been so certain of their victory now questioned their assumptions. Had they underestimated the humans? Had they ignored the lesson of memory, of judgment, that the Marine had so calmly delivered? The Zaruan conqueror was the first to speak after hearing the reports. His voice trembled with something other than anger, something closer to fear. They are not just another species to be crushed. They are something new. We may have made a grave mistake. Other delegates remained silent. They had expected the humans to cower, to bow to the overwhelming strength of their fleets. Instead, the humans had done something far more dangerous. They had fought back with intelligence, with memory, with resolve. They had turned the aliens' own arrogance into their downfall. The insectoid ambassador who had once urged for a swift strike now found herself pacing. This is not what we anticipated. They fight with reason, with purpose. If they continue like this, they will become more than just a nuisance. They will become a threat. And across the human colonies, in every corner of the galaxy where Earth's people had settled, something new began to grow. It was a quiet confidence, but it was powerful. Humans now knew they were no longer just another species among countless others. They had shown their strength, their resolve, and most importantly, their capacity to remember. The alien invaders might have thought the humans were harmless before. But now, they would learn that humanity was a force they would have to reckon with. And the lesson they had taught the galaxy about war crimes? It was just the beginning. The galaxy was forever changed after the humans' unexpected victory. The alien fleets had underestimated the power of humanity's resolve, and in doing so, they had sparked something far greater than they had ever anticipated. As news of the humans' triumph spread, the galaxy's balance began to shift. Alien Council was fractured. Some delegates, still clinging to their arrogance, insisted the humans were nothing more than a fleeting threat, one that could be crushed with enough force. But others, including many of the Empire's military leaders, had begun to question their previous assumptions. Could they really defeat a species that fought with such intelligence, with such relentless will? A species that held the memory of past mistakes like a sword, always prepared to strike again? The Zaruan conqueror, once certain of the inevitability of his empire's domination, now found himself haunted by the quiet truth of the humans' words. If they judge us, he muttered to himself, then what happens next? His fears were shared by many, for the humans had proven something terrifying. They fought not just to win, but to ensure that victory had meaning. And that was a power greater than any fleet or weapon. Back on Earth, the Marine who had sparked this conflict stood before a different council, a human one, this time. She had been called to answer for the actions of the colony defense, and while she had no regret for her words or her actions, she knew the weight of what had happened. She was just one voice among many, but her words had carried through space like a storm dot in the human council chamber. Faces lined with age and wisdom watched her as she spoke. She told them the same thing she had told the aliens. She did not regret challenging the galaxy, nor did she regret waking up the dormant fire that now burned within her people. But she also understood that humanity was now facing a different kind of war, one that was fought not just with weapons, but with ideas. I knew the risks when I spoke, she said, her voice steady. I knew the galaxy would not accept us quietly. But we've shown them that we will fight for our place. And we will fight for what's right, no matter the cost. The council nodded, their faces grave but resolute. Humanity had made its mark on the stars, but the real challenge was yet to come. The galaxy would not forget the lesson the Marine had taught. The question now was whether humanity would continue to bear the weight of their own judgment. Back across the galaxy, in the quiet of distant space, the alien leaders who had been part of the failed invasion deliberated in secret. Their previous confidence had been shattered, and they had begun to understand that the true power of humanity was not its fleets or its strength, but its unwavering sense of justice and its refusal to bow to tyranny. The Marine's words had planted a seed in the hearts of many alien citizens who began to question the brutal systems of their own empires. Across the stars, in the shadow of 1,000 stars and moons, whispers of rebellion began to grow. A new era was dawning, one where the idea of war, of judgment, and of memory were no longer isolated to Earth. Humanity had ignited something in the galaxy, something that would be felt for generations. A galaxy that had once believed in the strength of conquest was now seeing the power of restraint, of moral clarity, and of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. For the first time in galactic history, the idea of war crimes was not a distant concept reserved for the past. It was alive, it was real, and it was here to stay. And humanity was leading the way, not with their weapons, but with their laws, their moral compass, and their ability to remember the price of war. As the Marine stood at the window, looking out at the stars beyond, she realized that the battle was far from over. The galaxy had been shocked, but now the real work began. Humanity had to prove that their victory had meaning, that their judgment was not a weapon for destruction, but a tool for building something better. In time, the alien empires would either learn to follow humanity's example, or they would stand in defiance, knowing that they would be judged by a species who could never forget. And in that judgment, humanity would find its greatest strength.